Hi there. Are you ready to find out how low you can really go on the map of consciousness? This is this week's topic that I like to do every month. I like to share a level of consciousness from Dr. David R. Hawkins' Map of Consciousness. And I've hit most of the higher levels of consciousness, but I felt it was time to go low because they all exist in this realm of humanity that we're in. And you can't know, where you want to go if you don't know where you've been or where you are. So the map of consciousness is super helpful in this regard. And today we're looking at the low level of consciousness known as apathy and hatred. There's nothing good about it. The other two low levels of consciousness I've already covered is shame, which is the lowest level of consciousness on the map, which calibrates at 20 on the map of consciousness, or 10 to the 20th power. Really, there's no power in that. It's all force. It's really a forceful energy, not a powerful one. And the other low, how low can you go level is guilt at 30 on the map of consciousness. So today we're looking at the low blow, how low can you go level of consciousness known as apathy and hatred, which calibrates at 50 on the map of consciousness. And before I dive deeper into that, my name is Liz Garcia. I am your happy host of your weekly dose of higher consciousness that you can find on the YouTube channel at trumpeteroftruth.tv.com or on my podcast at trumpeteroftruthradio.com. This is the place to discover what I call the foundational basics and essential understandings for raising your level of consciousness and building a better life. And I support this intention by putting power and truth into context based on the consciousness research of Dr. David R. Hawkins and the map of consciousness that was created from decades of research into consciousness, which is really a proven energy scale to actualize your ultimate potential. And I'm going to share this book. The best book I'd recommend to get started in this topic is called The Map of Consciousness Explained, which for those of you watching, I'll show on the screen here. But today we're looking at the level of consciousness known as apathy and hatred. And it's a good idea to understand and be familiar with these levels. So if you find yourself in them, you need to know that you can get out of them, and I would recommend that you attempt to do so. So I'm going to share the book of slides because it shows it's a good example of the map of consciousness that I can show here on the screen. Let's put it up so you guys can see it for those of you watching. And you'll see that it's got 6 columns, the map. Each level of consciousness has 6 kind of identifiers, which I'm going to review right now. And then there's a segment in here that I've only just kind of looked at where Dr. Hawkins did a lecture that went deeper into the consciousness level of guilt and hatred, which is I have to say it was a little hard for me to read. Because when you get into these low levels of consciousness, or you encounter them, like Dr. Hawkins and I have, it can be horrific. So let's take a look at the level of consciousness known as apathy and hatred. That's the name of the level, so that's the name column. And it's a log 50, which is 10 to the 50th power. And anything below 200 is negatively oriented lower consciousness. And if you find yourself in lower consciousness on any topic and you don't like being there, you need to learn how to let go of it and move through it and get the hell out of there. Hell, I mean, is an understatement, especially if you fall this low on any topic, or, in your whole life. If you fall this low, it's hellacious. So, and if you project this stuff onto others, you're not doing yourself or anyone else in the world a favor. Okay, so the log is 10 to the 50th power, which is super low. It's not power, it's force. And that's Dr. Hawkins' original book that started all of this. Is called Power versus Force. But I like to recommend the Map of Consciousness Explained, as it's not such a high level of consciousness and a bit easier to comprehend than Power versus Force. But Power versus Force is most well, people that are his students know that's his original book on this whole topic. Okay, so there's a column known as process. And all of these columns have the same energy, because that's just what they are. They're the same energy. So if you listen to this and you recognize some aspect of this in your life, you can say, oh, geez, I'm running really hateful, apathetic energy here on this particular topic. It's a good idea to learn how to let it go, which is a whole other topic. I have podcasts and video casts on how to do that. And Dr. Hawkins has a book that's called Letting Go, The Pathway to Surrender, which helps you understand how to learn to let go. People will just kind of flippantly say, oh, let it go. But, what the hell does that mean, really? There's actually a process and you have to come into self-awareness that something's running in order to let it go. So, there's a couple of steps in the letting go process. So the process going on in apathy and hatred is abdication. Like, apathy is just life. You don't care anymore. You could die, you could kill yourself, it wouldn't matter. This would be a land where you'd want to kill yourself, the energy of it. You have no energy to do anything. So you just kind of give up, abdicate it all, and you just kind of start to fester in hatred and apathy and serious victimhood here. Like, you're hating the world here. The emotion going on is despair. And if you've ever felt deep despair, I have experienced deep despair. It can be beyond description. I mean, there's grief, but then there's despair as a whole other level of low vibe, for sure. And sure, it could serve a purpose, but to kind of spend too much time in these lower realms, this is really the land of the lower mind and the ego, the really low vibe ego that wants suffering. Like, it's like it lives and is fueled by suffering and destruction and all that negatively oriented stuff. So the kind of the thing you got to understand, and Dr. Hawkins will say this all the time, is understand what it is, but you can't like have a position on it. You just you understand it and you're like, let it go. Like, don't make it wrong, don't make it right. There's no position on any of this. If you're a spiritual aspirant, you cared about, being more light in the world. You don't have to become enlightened. That's a huge radical leap to be enlightened. Trust me. Dr. Hawkins will say the same thing. Enlightenment is a radical pursuit. I did not pursue it, but it radically came upon me to experience it. So I think that's, one reason why I'm just another voice that can speak from a different perspective, but similar perspective as to what you can experience when you start to enter these higher levels of consciousness and the confrontations you can have with the opposite of it, which is really what I've experienced. You get in these high levels and then you swing into the opposite. You have a confrontation with the opposite of that, because the opposite of that hates love and glory and God and divinity, enlightenment for sure. That's a whole other story. We're not going to go there today. I don't want to scare anybody. I just want to say you don't need to go this low. You need to become aware that you're getting low and you got to get yourself out of it, and you may need to seek help to get out of this lower level. So, so the process is abdication. The emotion is despair. Then there's something known as the self-view. This is how you view yourself in this energy field. And really, all these levels of consciousness you need to understand are simply impersonal energy fields. Like the energy of a light bulb. Do you have a position on that? Unlikely. right? The energy of a nuclear bomb. Do you have a position on that? You know, you understand the force of a nuclear bomb. You understand the energy of a light bulb. It's the same thing. It's like the energy of apathy and hatred. The self-view is hopeless. The energy there is hopeless. So if you've got some buried and suppressed emotions in your energy field and you're feeling this, it's because you have these buried and suppressed and unexpressed emotions that are creating it, essentially. And it takes self-awareness and determination and other higher consciousness to step outside of yourself, look at what you're doing, look at how you're feeling, and decide, I'm going to let this go. And this is where it takes, when you're feeling this kind of low stuff, you got to pray to God for help on it. And be willing to let go of it. Be willing to let go of the apathy and the hatred. So I don't want to get into the letting go of this right now. This is a level where you likely need higher consciousness help because you're so stuck in it. There's like a glass ceiling. You can't see your way out of it at all when you get this low. Okay, or at any level. Every level is an incredibly magnetic field, like the law of attraction. What you put your attention on, you attract. So if you put your attention on how you're feeling hateful and apathetic, and that's what you're spinning in your head, you're going to keep attracting like a magnet to you experiences, thoughts, beliefs about it. So you've got to break free of this field, which is, again, impersonal. It's here to kind of like a free will thing. It's like, oh, you're attracting this. You can keep attracting it. You can decide to look outside of yourself, let go of garbage, absurdities of the lower mind, and step into a better experience. Okay, so your self-view here is hopelessness. Hopelessness is a harsh reality. And it's real to those that are experiencing it. But I'm telling you, it's the past, the stuff in the past that's stuck in your past, that's stuck in your energy field is creating it. Nothing in the present. You can decide something else in the present moment and say, this is crap, it's old news, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Let go of the past. And then your God view here is not much better. Your God view is that God is condemning. When you feel like God is condemning, that's pretty harsh as well. And you can invite punishment. And it can feel like God is punishing you for sure, because you're in the energy field, the magnetic field of attracting it and asking for it, essentially. So I want to read, there's this other section in the book which I just found, which is kind of dumb that I only just found this, but that's okay. I didn't look that deeply. That goes deeper. It's a whole lecture that goes deeper into the level of consciousness known as apathy. And I'm going to show this book again. There's aversions and attractions at all the levels. So let me see if I can show this for those of you watching. There's a column of, there's an aversion and attraction at this level. And the aversion is to anything that's positively oriented. The attraction is to negativity here. Negativity, destruction, projection. That's what's going on at the lower levels of consciousness. So, here, I'm just going to read from Dr. Hawkins' book, and then I'll kind of interject, where I feel I can add value. So in apathy, one says, I can't handle things. It's an I cannot do, poor me, it's beyond, I think it's beyond, like, it's a low level of victimhood. So you give up. But the truth is, at this level, it's not that you can't handle things, it's that you won't. One sees yourself as a victim, and the aversion is seeing oneself as a co-player in life. So You are attracted to feeling like a victim because the energy's there for it, and it's part of your reality. Like you feel I am a victim. You feel it in this energy field. However, the truth is you're the creator of your own experience. And I can tell you, I can attest that when I experienced some really horrific things during quantum spiritual awakenings, there's the upside and there's the downside. During the downside, I heard, because I became open to the ability to hear spirit speak. I heard spirit say, you are the creator of this. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. I would not have consciously chosen to create the horrific experiences that I did. So the aversion at this level is to see yourself as a co-player in life. You have an aversion to accepting that you did it. You're not going to accept that at this level because you're a victim. Like, no, God hates me. I'm getting punished. Life hates me. It's the attitude and the feeling at this level. So apathy is a lack of taking responsibility. And he asks a question here, why is apathy a spiritual violation? And that's an interesting question to pose. Why is apathy a spiritual violation? It's really denying the existence of divinity and creation and stuff like that. And the answer here is, it is because sloth is one of the 7 cardinal sins, being a lack of respect for the divine gift of life itself and a negation of one's worth and that of everyone else. Whoa, this is pretty cool. This is a good one to read. I'm going to say it again because this is the first time I've read this. I should have read this first, but I didn't. I read something else, which I thought I was reading the right one, but I wasn't. So here we go again. Why is apathy a spiritual violation? It's a violation because sloth is one of the 7 cardinal sins, being a lack of respect for the divine gift of life itself and a negation of one's worth and that of everyone else. That's pretty huge, to accept that life is a gift. Even though we experience it as suffering on many occasions, or not. We can experience the suffering in life. You got to let go of the lower mind and really step into the truth and the level of consciousness known as acceptance at 350 on the map, that you are the creator of your own experience. So if you find yourself in these low levels, you got to wake up. This is where the veil is super thick as to the truth of who you are and the power within you to have the life that you really want and create the life that you want instead of suffering and all that crap that the lower mind loves. So here's some examples of someone who is apathetic. Would be one who would not pick up the newspapers or trash lying on the sidewalk and dispose of them properly. That's a simple, like, just dismissing stuff, not caring about life at all, or your environment, or your home, your living conditions. You know, if your home is a mess and you're hoarding stuff and there's junk everywhere, you don't clean up after yourself, there's some apathy running there, likely. Not caring for you. It's a reflection. If your house, take a look at your surroundings. What does it look like? Does it look like HGTV, you know, before and after, like a home makeover? Beautiful, pristine, well tended, or does it look like a hoarder house covered with garbage, dishes in the sink? This is not meant to be a judgment, although certainly I got judgment running in my voice right now. I just am not a fan of the lower mind and the ego. Just let me tell you, I'm kind of running that, not loving that right now. I can feel the energy of hating this level because of what I've been through. I'm a little Miss Victim here, but still, it's not pretty. So anyway, this is kind of an indication. If you look at like the inside of your car, your home, your office space, what does it look like? And this is not to judge yourself. This is to be aware that it's a reflection of what's going on inside of you. It truly is. And to not judge yourself, but to take the time to say, okay, what's running here? What am I not paying attention to? Or I'd let my environment around me fall apart because I'm not paying attention to how I really feel. I'm letting stuff remain buried and suppressed. So it's just an indicator. Cleanliness, right? How you taking care? You're apathetic. You don't take care of yourself or your home or your car or anything. You're running some low vibes in your life somewhere that you need to. It'd be helpful to take a look at and accept that you are doing that. So, so that was the example. You wouldn't pick up trash off the sidewalk. You let newspapers collect. You just have no energy to participate in life. The appropriate action is to have reverence for life itself, including one's own life. And that's what your aversion is too at this level. If you're feeling averse to reverence for your own life, that's an indication that you're stuck in a field, an energy field that's destructive to your own life. And isn't true. You have the power within you to get yourself out of it and turn it around. And a great place to start, I've really felt this strongly about not only alcoholism but victimhood, is to look at Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program. It's a superpower, and it's really going to set you up for success if you endeavor to kind of be a part of that. And that, by the way, calibrates at 10 to the 540th power, the 12 steps program. That'll help you get the hell out of hell and this level of consciousness. All right. So in apathy, one thinks of all the excuses and sees oneself as a victim. There is indifference instead of caring, a defeatist attitude instead of being an optimist. You rationalize an excuse because of being helpless and hopeless, which are denials and spiritual errors that negates one's self-worth and one's life as a gift of God. And at this level, it's hard to even say or hear the word God because it's so not present in your field. But I can assure you the presence of God is within all of us all the time. You just have to remove the blocks to it, which is what, when you hear look within, that's what I'm saying right now. Don't look, try to discover and let go of these feelings of apathy and hatred that you got running and learn to let them go, right? So this is looking within. This is part of the process to become self-aware. How am I feeling? How did I create this situation? If you're running these low levels, this is how you create destruction in your life. Okay. So the aversion at this level is to see, to choose, to revere, and to respect one's life. You're going to have an aversion to it. So here's a clue. If you have an aversion to optimistic points of view, reverence for your own life, reverence for the life of others, then you're in an energy field I'd recommend you work your way out of. Get help with it. Do a 12 steps program and apply it to this. Look at this level of consciousness as an addiction to victimhood. Okay. So the life in this body I respect. I take the medication for this. I take the medication for that because this life is a gift and the purpose is to serve God to the fullest extent. So this is a quote. This is a quote from Dr. Hawkins. Dr. Hawkins is well aware of the presence of divinity in every single one of us, including himself, and the experience of the presence of divinity. I've had it on numerous occasions. Dr. Hawkins is that. He was when he was alive, an enlightened human being. at the level of consciousness of the Buddha and Jesus Christ and avatars throughout history at 1,000 on the map of consciousness. So the lower mind wants to poo-poo that. And if you're feeling yourself poo-pooing this, then that's the lesser part of you unwilling to be of higher consciousness, unwilling to accept the truth or even know the truth, which it's interesting to know that according to consciousness research, only 2% of the planet cares about the truth. That's pretty huge. Okay. So let me just read on here a little bit. So aversion's really an aversion to taking responsibility for your own life, anything optimistic, loving, for sure. You have an aversion to all of it. So there's an aversion to seeing oneself as able, which can only come through willingness. And willingness on the map of consciousness is 10 to the 310th power. So if you're running apathy and hatred at 10 to the 50th power, which is really force, it's forceful, negatively oriented, downward pulling, you got to step into willingness. And that would be like a first step, saying, I'm willing to let go of apathy. And the energy of that statement, because willingness is already within you, the power of that is already within you. Stating it is going to kind of fuel the gas tank to start getting you out of there. I'm willing to release the need to be hateful. I'm willing to release the need to be apathetic. I'm willing to release the need to think my life is worthless and that the lives of others is too. So these are all powerful affirmations and statements that can start turning the energy around, right? You're putting gas in the tank with these statements. And you say them out loud. Superpowers, 10 to the 310th power, is a huge leap in power over this level. So one has to learn to surrender to God and say, Dear God, I of myself don't have the energy or the know-how to transcend this level. That's part of the 12 steps program, is to surrender to God, which that's a difficult thing to do because you're going to have an aversion to it because you think God's punishing. You're like, God's not on my side. Why would I surrender to God? So you need to understand that to think God is condemning and punishing holds no truth. It's not true at all. According to the map of consciousness, there's no truth in that. God is loving in everything you could ever hope it to be, infinitely powerful, infinitely loving, infinitely compassionate. So if you have it within you already to pray to God, you want to pray to God on this one because you don't have the energy. You can say, Dear God, I am willing, but I need your help. Because that God energy within you needs to be called forth. Like you're instead of denied. You'll have an aversion to saying this because you feel unworthy of God, for one thing. So then Dr. Hawkins says, you surrender to divine will, which is what energizes all of us. And I did a segment on God's will. God's will calibrates at 850 on the map of consciousness, which is beyond comprehension. The power and truth of that level. That's God's will for you, calibrates at 10 to the 850th power. It's a quantum leap from apathy. So when you surrender to divine will, I usually say this to myself. I usually say, I am willing to surrender to divine will because I understand my personal will doesn't hold a candle to it, right? Personal willfulness is typically, can be below 200. It doesn't have to be. It can be constructive to have powerful will. Like you have the power within you to succeed and set goals and meet goals and have a fun life, and you have that. But even at that level, personal will does not hold a candle to divine will. Personal will is probably in our world, on the positive side, would run anywhere in the 200s to the 400s. But in general, 2 to 300 is a high level of consciousness for anyone on planet Earth. Because only 85% of the planet, although recent calibrations, which are really interesting, have calibrated that has changed to only 77. So that's gone down. 77% of the planet calibrates below 200, where it was, prior to this calibration, 85% of the planet. So there's a leap in consciousness going on at the lower end, which is good news. But understand, to be, in the United States, 50% of the population calibrates above 200, but really likely in the 2 to 300s, The 400s is getting up into very high level, people that are high level, like statespeople, like John F. Kennedy, former president of the United States, Oprah Winfrey. She's pretty high level, accomplishment, higher intention, higher consciousness that affects ripple out into the world. So this is people in the 4 to 500s have a significant effect on the world, where most of us that are running positively oriented, maybe 2 to 300. So the whole point of this is to say personal will could be 2 to 300, or likely for 77% of the world, below 200. Super low, no power at all, versus God's will for every one of us is 850, which is 10 to the 850th power. So with that understanding, I say, I'm willing to surrender to divine will, understanding my own will cannot hold a candle to it. So that's just something, an affirmation you could use. So I'm going to repeat this. When you surrender to divine will, this is what energizes all of us. There's not enough energy coming out of the ego because it's getting too much payoff from being hopeless and is coming from negation of self-worth. And Dr. Hawkins talks about the juice of the ego. This is like the ultimate juice of the ego, because the ego gets a payoff from being a victim and having these feelings of unworthiness and self-worth, and seeing seeing yourself and others as worthless. There's a ego, juice of the ego, there's a payoff to it. And the aversion is to an affirmation of one's self-worth and seeing life as a gift from God. So again, aversion is to the positive side. So if you're feeling yourself averse to something positively oriented, it's a sure sign you're running lower frequencies, and you're in an attractive field that you may not want to be in, really, unless you like being a victim and juicing the ego and saying, oh, poor me, right? I'm sounding judgmental right now. I am, because I went through it myself, right? I was a victim for a long time of what I've experienced, and I kept running the victim energy on it, like, punished by God, blah, 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 the whole thing. So another attraction at this level is to see oneself as weak, with the aversion being to see oneself as potentially strong. So the attraction is to see oneself as weak, hopeless, helpless, not going to do anything, do nothing, life hates me type of attitude. The attraction is to self-sabotage. The aversion is to self-endorsement. Apathy is a negation of the reality of divinity as an expression of one's own life. So that's it for a really low level of consciousness. Apathy and hatred and hopelessness. Geez, despair. I've been in some pretty low levels. I've confronted them. Let's just say I've confronted them, which is kind of a weird thing, but I've experienced a quantum spiritual awakenings on 24 times in the past 20 years, where I come into the presence of divinity, like awareness of oneness, And it's stunningly beautiful beyond description. Dr. Hawkins will say the same thing, stunningly beautiful, like holy crow, like tears of joy. You can't withhold the joy, the inner joy and the glory of God when you're confronting this, or you're in the presence of it. So I guess the word is I aligned with it. I came into the attractor field of this somehow. It's in my karmic propensity to do so. However, it was also in my karmic propensity to attract the opposite of it. And Dr. Hawkins talks about you don't want to go there. You don't want to go where, it's an absurdly low level of consciousness. And I had it calibrated for me that the energy fields that I have confronted were negative 285 on the map, which is a quantum leap off the map into horrific darkness. Hawkins will tell you don't want to go there. You call upon God the minute you get there. If you end up there, you call God, because it feels like eternal damnation. It's purgatory sounds like a walk in the park relative to this. So just want to let you, not to scare you, but to let you know, if you ever come into any type of despair, you call on God and divinity and divine will to get you out of there, and be willing to accept the help. Right? So don't let the lower mind and the ego wants you to remain suffering, and juice the core of it. Juicing the core of the narcissistic ego is what Dr. Hawkins would say. So I make light of it. I love admitting that I have the narcissistic core of the ego running in all of us. Me too. All of us. Dr. Hawkins. Although he kind of transcended that rather fully. All right. So that's today's weekly dose of higher consciousness. And each month I like to take a look at a main level, so we can all become acquainted with the map on a deeper, more meaningfully and deeper, so that you can really integrate this into your energy field and understanding. If you like what's going on here, I'd love for you to subscribe to Trumpeter of Truth, your weekly dose of higher consciousness, on the podcast at trumpeteroftruthradio.com, or on my YouTube channel at trumpeteroftruth.tv.com. Next week, we're doing 101 ways to something. I'm not sure what it is. And then the week after that, we're going to do your weekly dose of higher consciousness quiz. And then the week after that, I want to do the topic known as the spiritual ego. And it's a good idea to recognize it. It took me a while. I was running the spiritual ego for a while until I realized what I was doing. And I started to snap out of it. So we're going to talk about the spiritual ego and what to look for in that regards. Thanks for joining me. Oh, I forgot. I always want to say before I end every episode, love is the truth. And love calibrates at 500 on the map of consciousness, or 10 to the 500 power. This is way more power in love than there is in the mind. And just because you're not aware of it does not mean it doesn't exist. I'll see you again.